You cannot have anybody in charge of the money because inevitably they will corrupt it. There are too many examples throughout history, so many. This shouldn't be a surprise anymore, but we will go through a period where we will have a national global movement for the separation of money and state in the same way that we did for church and state and other separations of powers over time, because otherwise it gets abused. But we never had the technology before. We never had a way of doing it, right? If you don't have a way of doing it, then it's just a pipe dream. But people don't realize that we have the technology or the solution to do it, right? And that solution has to be a perfect one, because if there's any flaws in it, then it compromises everything. And so to get to the point where it's credible enough to be seen by a sufficiently large percentage of the population to carry a movement like that, inevitably it takes time, because confidence builds over time, regardless of the fact that it takes a long time to get to grips with it, in understanding it and, deprogramming all of these things. It's not a quick thing. It is inevitably going to happen, but it's inevitably going to happen because we can all do it individually. Like, we can all individually separate money and state. Nobody stops you. No one can stop you. They can make it harder, right? But no one can stop you fully adopting Bitcoin. And once a sufficiently small percentage of us do it, a sufficiently large percentage, which is still very small, right, does this, it starts to wield meaningful power. And you see this in the US with the elections. Trump appealed to, obviously the crypto segment more broadly, but also specifically the Bitcoin voters. And a lot of Bitcoin voters are one-issue voters. I'm a one-issue voter.
It may sound silly to someone from the outside. How can you be a one-issue voter just on Bitcoin? You're like, because all these other externalities that flow from separation of money and state.
They're all downstream. So it's like you can either deal with the symptoms or you deal with the cause. I'll deal with the cause. That's the most important thing. The symptoms will resolve themselves if we deal with the cause. Bitcoin's an infectious disease, but in a positive way. My favorite thing about Bitcoin is the effect it has on people. It changes who you are. It sharpens the senses that we all carry with us. It hones your critical thinking ability. There is no way to get Bitcoin and not become a critical thinker in the process. It's the inevitable outcome. And then just think about the positive aspects that brings to all the other parts of your life. When you are dealing with perfect money, which means the monetary supply can't be changed, this natural level of competition drives prices lower through that competitive element, but it also drives the quality higher over time. When prices go down and quality goes up, it means the value of the money increases for everybody. And so even the people who are not productive in a society, they're old or they're young or they're ill or there's something that stops them being productive, their quality of life continues to increase along with everybody else, which is just totally the opposite of what we have now. They're constantly being stolen from or undermined. It's a total 180 from where we are now, but it's entirely logical if you start from the beginning. The source of friction that people have with some of this thinking is the implicit assumption in the question. And the implicit assumption in the question is you don't want spending to fall, or that the level of spending right now is a good thing. If that's your starting point, then any reduction is a bad thing. But the reality is, like, we waste so much spending now. We waste so much capital because the price of money is distorted. So if the price of money is distorted, how can you value any investment? Even the most simple purchasing decision, how can you ascribe an actual correct evaluation of the value of that to you now and versus a year's time? You just can't, because it's the wrong price. The money's the wrong price. Like, everything's corrupted. When you start to think about in Bitcoin terms, every decision becomes, well, do I really need this? Is this actually going to add something to my life? Right? And that can take a lot of forms. And obviously we do still spend, we still invest. But the amount of marginal spending that is just wasted reduces. And overall, the quality of the decision making that we go through is improved. And my argument then is we make the economy fitter. by improving decision making. We have a clearer cost of money. And when you compound over time more efficient spending and a fitter economy, it doesn't take a lot of time before the economy is a lot bigger and a lot stronger than the current path you're on. The whole premise of the question is wrong, because you're not going to need a big mortgage in Bitcoin terms to buy a house, because housing has been monetized. Housing has been monetized because Bitcoin wasn't here. If Bitcoin was here, people wouldn't be storing their wealth in housing, they'd be storing their wealth in Bitcoin. And when you start to measure assets in Bitcoin, you realize you're bleeding your wealth by putting them in other assets. It's like, I own a house and every year the house is worth less in Bitcoin. Why am I storing my wealth in the house? Through that logic, the house returns to being a utility, not a store of value. The banking system is lending the money for housing, and because of the fraud of fractional reserve banking is legitimized, right? And it is just fraud. It is fraud. You're creating money out of thin air and allocating risks to depositors that they're not aware they're even running. It is the greatest mis-selling ever. To think that we've had mis-selling scandals on lots of other, like life insurance and all these different sectors, but we haven't had it in banking is ridiculous. The banking system is just fraud. If you go and ask 100 people in the street what happens when you put your money in the bank, I bet you only less than 5%, maybe 1% would be able to actually tell you. You're loaning money to the bank. The deposit is not your money. You have become a creditor of the bank. It is just a fraud. A total fraud. They're not solvent. They're solvent if you continue to pump asset prices. But asset prices can't go down. And so if asset prices can't go down, you're not in a free market. The reason they're stepping in to try and solve it is because they can't face the consequences of not solving it. If you know that whenever asset prices fall, your banking system goes insolvent and wipes everything out, you cannot allow it to happen. Ever. They'll distort the prices through a combination of money printing and introduction of regulations, and then point the finger at the free market for not working. And the free market's not working, so now we need intervention. This is all just bonkers. Inflation hurts everybody in society it's just a degree to which it does. I would say everybody excluding one category. And that one category are the people connected to the money printer. And so to the poor person can look at that rich man and say, well, you're getting wealthier, you're getting richer. We need to tax you. It's like, no, I'm just losing less than you're losing. We can be told to point at each other, but the real problem's over there. The real problem is the big red button they keep pressing, which steals from everybody. It just steals a lot more from some than it does others. We can create money at the stroke of a pen. So it doesn't take a lot of creativity to move the pen in a direction that benefits your business interests if you are that person or very close to that person. The fact that you would have politicians who enter politics not being worth $100 million, and then 10 years later, they're worth $100 million. You've got to ask questions. And it's, speaking fees, lobbying, it's all just other words for corruption. If you want to understand economics or become a professor and teach others, then you need to toe the line. This is what you need to learn. Central banking is good. Keynesian economics is good. What is beautiful about Bitcoin is on a Bitcoin standard, you don't have these issues. This is why Bitcoin is so important, because once you start thinking about Bitcoin, it changes everything for you. And then you begin to think about everything critically. And it's just like dismantling everything. And then you get to rebuild it afresh the way it should be. But imagine if we didn't have to deprogram everybody first. Like this is the future we get to look forward to when we're on a Bitcoin standard. This is why Bitcoin is a national security issue. It should squarely be on the table after the US strategic reserve versus the crypto stockpile announcement. So every country in the world needs to be actively talking about this. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind. The Bitcoin reserve is great because it's effectively laid the foundation stone here that will get built upon. And the budget neutral terminology used, I think, could be pretty broad. If I had to comply with a budget neutral thing, I'd be like, if I can save money over there, I can buy Bitcoin. And if you are in the process of taking an axe to the spend of the government, you can potentially buy a lot of Bitcoin. Just establishing it as a competitive reserve asset to gold in the financial system gives it a layer of credibility, especially being the US. Just globally, like, everybody has to sit up and take notice. So you should have security councils all around the world in each of the individual countries trying to get up to speed with what the hell this Bitcoin thing is, and don't we need to buy some? Or don't we need to copy and paste this strategic reserve wording into our own systems? Otherwise, we're at risk of being left behind.